Hello, it's Georgetta Gancars here, and I just wanted to continue the palette knife painting video. And if you saw my previous video, it was just telling you about a little bit about the palette knife and some brushes that you can use. On this video, I want to focus on how you would start the painting. And if you missed the previous video, I was talking a little bit about the knives, and this is the beginning of a painting, just masking out the areas. And I was just saying, for an example, in this mountain short mini painting, you would kind of want to outline the areas that you were going to paint, at least the edges of the areas. So say, for an example, this is a mountain, you kind of outline this edge of the mountain, and then you might put a line going here that divides this area. And then if these are the reflections, you might kind of just draw an outline here. And then if this was like a tree coming about, you might just draw that edge. So it's just a very simple drawing. And I explained to students the best way to do that is to use pencils. You can see these pencils are drawing and sketching pencils, and they go from light to dark. You can use the lightest pencil on the canvas. And if you make a mistake, you can have a kneaded eraser, or you can use watercolor pencils. I love using watercolor pencils because you can see you can use the color of, for an example, if I was doing this, I might outline it in blue. And then if I knew that I was going to put blue here, I could even color with my pencil the colors that I was going to put on the canvas ahead of time. Or if I was going to put green over here, I could color this area green, or just do a little swatch of green. Therefore, I know exactly what colors I'm going to put on the canvas in those areas. And again, you want to have your color swatches, and these are my color swatches, would be for this painting. And it's just basically, you don't have to always do them in order like this, but you definitely want to put the colors, these little tiny swatches, and you want to put the colors that you're going to use in the painting. So say, for an example, if my sky here happens to be a layer of white, and then you can see I added purple to the white, so I have a light purple, and then I have a blue. And then I kind of blended that all together with the palette knife. And what I did is I used a very large palette knife. And the reason I used a large palette knife is because it covers a larger surface area. So that means I would want to use a really large knife. This could be medium for this size painting. And I would just keep smoothing it, like if I was doing butter on a cake to make that area smooth. For this area, I laid down the blue first, and I followed the shapes. So because this kind of goes up and down, I laid down the blue. I made this shape in a dark blue, this shape in a dark blue, and that shape in a dark blue. And then what I did is I used my heat gun, and we spoke about it. You can use a heat gun or a hair dryer, 6 inches away from the canvas, moving the heat gun back and forth 6 inches away from the canvas for about a minute, 2 minutes, until it's dry. And I usually put the heat gun on high, but again, it's 6 inches away. And then when that's dry, I can come back and I can now start layering these little light blues on top of the dark blues. And then I blow dry it again with my heat gun, and then I can lastly put the white on top. Now, you don't have to keep blow drying it in between. You could work what you call wet on wet. But if you work wet on wet, you have to barely touch the canvas with your palette knife, because if you press too hard, the colors are all going to blend together, and you don't want that. You see how these colors are all separate? You can see the blue, the light blue, and then the white and blue. And here I blended, so I had blue and white, and I kind of moved my knife back and forth in a circular motion, so those colors would kind of blend together. Here I moved them in this kind of motion. And then here I had a layer again of the dark blue. You can see the dark blue underneath. And then I layered it with the light blue and the white. But I blended them together when they were wet. I didn't let them dry. And the top, I let it dry. So I did the blue, let it dry, then I did the medium color blue, let it dry, then I put the white on top. Again, here I kind of just blended it. And the reason why I blended this area is because I want to make it look like a reflection. And if it looks like a reflection, it's obviously not going to have as much texture. It's going to be smooth. So you have to look at your landscape, whatever it is, and decide, do you want reflections? They're usually smooth. Also, you know, the water moves. It could have, this is just stage one. I might start putting, like, in these empty spaces, maybe some kind of waves or movement of water. And then I might go back up here and put lighter clouds. But this is just step one. And the other thing about a palette knife painting is it's really interesting if the landscape has different textures. So this is very smooth, this is super texturized, and this is blended. And it kind of makes it interesting. So try to have that variation in your palette knife painting, where you have one area smooth, one area texturized, one area blended. You can also paint with a paintbrush and do some areas with a palette knife or some areas with the paintbrush. And again, we spoke a little bit about how you can build that texture up beforehand. And this is nowhere near finished. It's just stage one. It's like a 5-minute demo. But what you could do is you could use modeling paste. And I discussed this in the other video. It's a very thick paste. It looks like very thick textured paint. And if you know you're going to have mountains here and you want that texture, what you could do is you could kind of put that shape of that mountain on there with the modeling paste with the knife. And you can carve into that modeling paste and make different shapes with your knife, moving it in different ways. You can push down and lift up, and it makes a really cool texture that way. And then you can let that dry. And then when it's dry, you're already going to have the texture down here that you want. And then you can just come back with the paint and drag the knife across that texture. And what ends up happening is the paint will only pick up on the edges of where it's texturized. So in other words, if this has like a lot of texture, let's pretend I took red paint with my knife and I dragged it lightly across here, it would only pick up in some areas because it's so texturized. The knife can't sit flatly on the canvas. You can just drag it right across and it's only going to pick up in some areas. You can also recycle old paintings. So this is like an old painting that I did, and I could kind of, another demo, and I could go back over this and drag other colors. And because it's so texturized, it's only going to pick up in certain areas, the color, because unless I press really hard, right? But if I go very lightly across, it's only going to pick up on those areas where the texture is raised. You could also do that when you're doing highlights. Maybe you want to add some yellow here, and you just drag it across very lightly. So those are some things that you want to do when you're starting out your palette knife painting, and this would be step number one. And then we'll work in class how to get those details, because we still have to add the water in here, we have to add more clouds, we have to add a little bit more highlights. But again, preparing your canvas ahead of time, having your beautiful color scale so you know exactly, and your color swatches so you know what colors you're going to put on the canvas. You can use watercolor pencils, you can use regular drawing pencils. It just makes the process a little bit easier for you, especially when you're a beginner. Okay, so I will do another video, and the next video will show you a little bit more about details, and in class we'll be talking about how we can add those details, and then for the highlights. But again, this is just starting the canvas, blocking it out, masking it out, doing the drawing, only doing an outline, and then moving on. And I will also put, for the students, I'll put links so you'll be able to see how the drawings looked in the beginning, how we masked them out. Okay, see you in class.